Welcome everyone to another episode of What's Up Mainframe. I'm joined by Venkat Balabhadrapatruni.
Perfect. There you go.
And we're going to talk about an exciting topic which we covered with Goran Begic several weeks ago, Gen AI. But as everyone knows, Gen AI just continues to evolve. There are all sorts of changing approaches, and there are all sorts of acronyms. And so we're going to go from LLM, the large language models, to MCP. So Venkat, can we jump in? What is MCP? What are we talking about?
Well, before we jump in, I think it'll be good to kind of give some context.
We'll give
right?
some context, of course.
Why? The key thing goes back to your comment about it's been evolving.
Yes.
It's been changing, and it'll continue to evolve, right? So will there be an acronym tomorrow? Absolutely, there will be a new acronym tomorrow.
Super.
Right? There will be a new standards that are going to emerge. But let's talk about why we got here. Yes. I think that'll kind of ground us in terms of why we are looking at it, what is the importance of it, and where would things go.
Okay.
Right? LLM, large language model. I mean, they have been rage when it comes to Gen AI. They're the foundational piece of anything that and everything Gen AI or agentic AI is going to get into.
Got to feed the information somewhere.
Got to feed the information somewhere. But if you take a step back and look at these LLMs, most of the LLMs out there have been trained on data. And this data is whatever is available publicly.
Publicly, yes.
And which means that at some point, the LLMs know only the information to a certain date as to when they were trained. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is the publicly available information.
Exactly.
So when we go into the landscape of talking about Gen AI from an enterprise perspective, there is a lot of data. And when we say data here, it's not just the bits and bytes like the numbers, like social security numbers and things like that. It's design documents, source code, your policies, building codes on the good, bad, and ugly of what organization needs to do. That is the data that is sitting behind a firewall that these LLMs don't know anything about.
And organizations don't want to open necessarily.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, how do you bridge the gap of, well, the LLM has been trained on certain amount of data. It doesn't know anything that's latest. It doesn't know anything about that sitting behind a firewall.
Yeah.
And for any enterprise to gain value from Gen AI, tapping into that enterprise data is key.
Yes.
Otherwise, ChatGPT will do the job, right? For anything that's publicly available.
Yeah.
So to solve that particular problem of getting access to real-time data, there was a technique called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, that came about. That was a way to get to the real-time data, enterprise data. Worked great. The problem with that was it was custom to the LLM that you're talking about. Then the problem becomes, hey, if I switch my LLM, what do I do with my RAG? So the industry looked at that and said, we need a standard. There was a proposal for a standard in December of 2024.
Okay.
And that's what was called the Model Context Protocol.
MCP. Okay.
MCP, right? What it enables is providing a standard interface to tap into the latest information or enterprise data without having to worry about what LLM, what client you're using.
Okay.
So it is one of those things, in the IT world, we talk about build once, use multiple times. MCP enables that and fits into that model.
Okay.
Right? So that's the reason why MCP was even born. A lot of people look at it as technology, yet another piece of technology, but it is a technology that is solving a problem that needs to be solved, which is that standardization of how you talk to the different data sources.
Definitely.
So that's, in a nutshell, what MCP is about.
Yeah, I read a nice analogy is MCP is kind of the USB-C in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There you go.
So that's at so thank you for the timeline and the general level. So what does that mean for us in Broadcom? And when people are asking us about what we're doing, okay, so what are we necessarily having an MCP for?
So at Broadcom, as we have been saying, our goal is to provide additional value to our customers. And from day one, we have been stating that our approach is to integrate Gen AI into our tools. We are not going to build a Gen AI
Something separate.
Yep. Right? MCP is one of those architectures that is enabling us to do exactly that, which is integrate or enable the integration with our tools and also help our customers integrate with their data so that they can gain additional value from this technology.
And so what that means essentially is, so I think a lot of them have been feeding their own models, maybe internally, with the information they have about our products. But now we're going to enable the connection directly to whatever information is in our products.
Right. Okay. So in the pre-MCP world, for anybody to leverage an LLM with their data, there were two main approaches. One is I train it, which is resource and time consuming.
Extremely.
Not to mention, a lot of organizations do not have the skills
as well, or
the budget
or
to
the
be
budget.
able to do that, right? That was one problem. The other one is once you do train and go through that process, as the data is evolving, you need to go re-index the model.
Again.
Right? So there is a maintenance aspect that goes with it. So MCP is think of it as a simple abstraction layer over a particular data source. And all it's doing is it is giving additional context, relevant context to the model so that it is like that icing on the cake. LLM is the cake. The data that it knows, the information that it knows is the cake.
Yep.
But adding in those layers, icing, with the latest context, relevant information is what MCP provides. Yeah. So going back to your question of what does that mean for us? Well, by building these MCP servers for our tools, and I'll take a very concrete example of what we are doing with Endevor. Endevor, as you and everybody is familiar, is a source configuration system. It is a build engine. It is a lifecycle management tool. And for enterprises that are using it, there is tons of data that Endevor knows. So what we are enabling, what we mean by integrating Gen AI with Endevor is to build an MCP server.
Connect straight into all of that.
And give organizations the flexibility to say, we really do not care about what your Gen AI strategy is. You can be using Google Gemini. You can be using Copilot. You can be using AWS Q. You can be using an on-prem model. Yep. You can be using a custom model that you built. We don't care. As long as it supports the MCP protocol, you can now tap into Endevor leveraging this MCP server. What kind of data you can get out of Endevor? Well, let's put that in the context of a use case.
Yes.
Most of the organizations in the mainframe world say, we want to know what we have. It comes down to, as a developer, the basic application understanding capabilities.
Yep.
Which is, what does this program do? What is it dependent on? When was this last modified? Who modified it? How is it being built? When was it deployed? Guess who has that information?
Endevor.
So, what we're doing with this MCP server is, organizations can now say, explain this Endevor element. What is the business logic that it's doing? And then ask a subsequent question. what is it dependent on? Because if you think of a developer, if they're trying to make a change, especially the new generation who are coming to the platform, who have no clue as to what the application structure is, who have no clue as to what a particular module is doing, but they've been tasked to go change it, right? And all they know is they're sitting in Endevor. But leveraging this MCP server, they can now tap into the information that Endevor has without having to know the Endevor concepts.
Exactly.
They can use natural language processing. I can say, hey, explain this particular program. I don't have to tell it is sitting in stage 1. You need to look up the map to resolve the debate. No. All of that information is abstracted from the user. They can use natural language processing to interact with Endevor and gain value from that. So that's exactly is what we're building from a Broadcom perspective, and that's an example of how we are going to integrate Gen AI into our tooling.
That's fantastic. Of course, I do have to ask, because if we're making that connection to Endevor, which has, I wouldn't even say not just tons of information, but just oodles and oodles. I would kind of like to swear, I won't, but there's just so much there, right? So, all right, so the developer's using, right, whatever agents and whatever their organization provides, natural language, yes, explain this to me, but there's got to be kind of a performance hit. Or do we know how that's going to function?
That's a great question, right? And the answer is we're learning, to be honest with you. So the MCP architecture enables us to leverage the existing set of APIs that we have built.
Yep.
Right?
So Endevor Web Services here.
Endevor Web Services here, right? And if you look at all of Broadcom, we've been saying API enable, API first, right? That's been our mentality.
Yes.
So on one hand, building these MCP servers for various tools by leveraging these APIs is a no-brainer.
Of course.
But we're also wary of the fact that, to your point, if you look at these APIs, they've been built with the mindset of automation. Mm-hmm. They are not structured today to handle this natural language, because one user can say, as an example, going back to the Endevor stuff, explain what this particular program is doing and also highlight any dependencies that it has. What that translates to is 2 API calls to Endevor today.
Minimum.
Right? Is that the right thing? Will it scale? What will be the impact? That is the learning journey that we are going through.
Definitely.
Putting on the technical hat, if you force me to make a prediction, I think we will go down the path of optimizing some of these APIs or creating an abstraction layer.
Yep. In order to handle these different kind of requests.
Exactly. But the approach we're going to take, and as always, is to rely on our customers to drive some of those use cases. We know what is the art of possible. We're working with customers to figure out how would they leverage this, what would make sense. And we're just talking about a single MCP server here.
Exactly, because there are going to be many of them, right?
There can be many of them.
We're API enabled. We have lots of products. This is considered across Broadcom Mainframe division.
Not just that, across the industry.
Oh, well, across the industry, of course, yeah.
Right? Because if you look at these MCP servers, there is an MCP server for ServiceNow.
Yes.
There is an MCP server for GitHub.
For all the Git servers,
For all the Git servers.
Just look it up if you haven't. The list is exhaustive.
It's exhaustive.
How many are there?
It's going to grow.
Yeah.
Right? The good thing about the standard is you can be confident that a GitHub MCP server or a ServiceNow MCP server can work with the MCP server that we are building.
Yes.
But from a customer's point of view, trying to figure out the relationship, how do you configure them to talk to each other in a secure manner, will be an exercise.
Yes.
And it comes down to partners like us, Broadcom, to be able to help our customers with that journey.
Exactly.
So the way I would say it is, yes, we will be in the business of building these MCP servers so that organizations can tap into the data, metadata that our tools know and context that they know. But we'll also be helping them with how can they build MCP servers for their own design documents.
And maybe also, how do they overlap? How do they connect the different MCPs for particular teams or segments of the organization?
Personas, use cases. Because one thing that I can share is, the example that I gave you from an Endevor MCP server was from a developer perspective. As a developer, I would like to know what changed. As a developer, I'd like to know what the dependencies are. But there is other personas in the organization, like an operator.
Yeah.
An operator will get a ticket from ServiceNow. The MCP service from server for ServiceNow is going to alert the operator, Ashton, gets a ticket, something went wrong, and Ashton would like to know what got deployed to my environment.
Yep.
Well, guess what? Endevor knows that information.
Yep.
So the same MCP server can serve different use cases and different personas.
Yep.
And can interact with each other to solve the bigger problem that organizations are having. And that's the value that we want to bring.
Certainly. And so our whole approach, I guess we'll kind of close with this, is borne out in what analysts are saying about this particular direction, right?
So when we talked with analysts on what our approach is, which is one, we are going to integrate Gen AI into our solutions. They said, absolutely the right approach. Because we're going to look at Gen AI as yet another tool. Yep. It's not going to be a magic wand, especially for the mainframe organizations.
Yep.
Given the history, given the complexity of the applications, given the different languages that are in play, right? And when we said we're going to standardize on MCP as the architecture approach to do that integration, hands down, every single analyst said that is the way to go. It makes perfect sense. Now, will there be an MCP 2.0 or XCP down the road? Who knows? But we are prepared for that, right? That's the nature of the technology. It's going to evolve, and we've been on that journey. We will continue to be on that journey.
And we need all the feedback we can get.
We need all the feedback that we can get. Absolutely.
So as you're interested, do reach out, and we can share, especially around the Endevor MCP, right? As
absolutely.
You mentioned. And then we'll go from there.
Yep.
Venkat, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.